that they have, quote, destroyed my body, but they have not destroyed my soul.
Father Bernard Lynch of the Society of African Missions is an Irish Catholic priest born and reared in the small town of Ennis on the western coast. From the time he was a small child, the priesthood attracted him. He loved everything about it, especially the celebration of Eucharist in the Mass. But his ministry was not to be in Africa, like most of his order, nor in his own home country.
Ready to go at home?
Father Bernard Lynch's parish was the mean streets of New York City, working with young, dying gay men. He started a ministry to the gay and lesbian community in the city in 1977. Of the 600 people he met in the early years of that ministry, only 3 are still alive. He was with 60 of those people when they died of AIDS. It's a far cry from the narrow streets of Ennis, and the process radicalized him. He had marched with the civil rights movement in Northern Ireland in the 60s. In the 80s, he fought for an end to discrimination against gay and lesbian people in New York. There was trouble with his church. He was ordered out of the metropolis. Then he was targeted, investigated, and accused of child sex abuse. When the case spectacularly collapsed in court because there was no evidence against him, the judge took the highly unusual step of not simply dismissing the charges, but also he found him not guilty.
And upon hearing all of the evidence in this case, and evaluating all the evidence in this matter, this court has a reasonable doubt and finds the defendant, Father Lynch, not guilty of the crimes.
The controversial priest has been the subject of 2 documentaries by Irish filmmaker Conor McAnally. Father Lynch is famous, some would say notorious, in his own hometown. It's not often that someone from Ennis, County Clare appears on Ireland's top-rated television programme, The Late Late Show.
Now, quite coincidentally and appropriately, our next guest is of particular interest. He's a psychotherapist in private practice. He's a member of the Mayor of New York's Task Force on AIDS. He's a theological consultant to Dignity New York, which is a Catholic homosexual organization. And he was the founder of an AIDS ministry group established to deal with the spiritual and other temporal needs of AIDS people in New York. He's a Catholic priest. He's from the Society of African Missions, that's SMA to us, and he's originally from Ennis, County Clare. Would you welcome, please, Father Bernard Lynch.
Father Lynch talked of his work, but there were other, more personal issues just below the surface.
Stuart was another young fellow who died. I knew him in college, and he wanted to become a Catholic. And I was running track down at Columbia University, and Stuart was on the track. And if you don't mind, you know, in a typical New York fashion, he said, "Hey man, you know, you've got very good legs." I said, "What?" You know. And then I kind of said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I've been running all these years, so I guess it has it has paid off at some level." So we started chatting, and then he said, "You know," I said, "You know, why did you admire my legs?" You know, and he said, "Well, I'm gay." I said, "Oh, that's okay." And I said, "Well, I'm a priest. You know, I'm booked."
After I did The Late Late Show, someone said to me, "Bernard, were you lovers with Stuart?" And the truthful answer to that is no, we weren't. We were not. But we could have been. I did love him. He was brilliant. he was beautiful person, and he was good person. But I was a priest, and I was very much in love with my priesthood. At the time, I believed and accepted that in order to be priest, I could not and would not enter into that relationship at that level. I never discussed my sexuality or agreed to discuss my sexuality even in the Late Late Show. For that reason, and I was given a guarantee by Bridget Ruane, Gay Byrne's research assistant, that that would not be so, that I would not be asked to do that.
That picture of Mary at the foot of the cross, you know, that's such a popular image, thank you, came to mind. And for me, that image is gone. It's now Nora Garcia standing by her son of 23 years of age as he died. And that is such a privilege for me. Do you know? Please understand this correctly. I mean, I don't need to read the Gospels anymore, do you know? Because they're there every day for me and these people.
Are you homosexual, Father?
No.
No, you're not. I had to ask that in the context of what we were talking about.
I was at a very vulnerable moment discussing Stuart. And now you understand a little more of my vulnerability in relationship to Stuart. And I remember him saying, "Are you homosexual, Father?" My heart fell to the floor. Everything in me wanted to say, "No, I am not, but I am gay." Because I don't like the word homosexual. It's a medicinal word, it's a clinical word. It's too genital. It's not, quote, wholesome. But I stopped at the no. That, to me, was the biggest sin I've ever committed. To deny my createdness in God. Now, I could rationalize it left and center that it was, you know, and I have tried to, and people have said it was the right thing to do, including my provincial, including my father, including my family, including the gay community itself. Because I sacrificed myself for the cause. But do you know, Conor, I really do not believe that. That kind of sacrifice is a statement of self-hatred. And there'll never be freedom for any minority as long as anyone in that minority, even for the sake of the minority, has to deny their minorityness. That is indeed to mistake the wood for the trees. I was wrong to do that. I was really wrong to do that. And I regret doing it.
What happens within the Catholic Church to a priest who declares himself to be a gay man?
He's on his way out. the church will tolerate a closeted gay clergyman. The church it makes it very clear in flag. Recent documents from Rome said that we should only accept candidates for the priesthood whose homosexuality is ego-dystonic, and that's a psychoanalytic word meaning you're sick. You hate your homosexuality, you hate yourself as being homosexual, then you're a candidate for the priesthood. But the document goes on to say, and this is from Cardinal Wright and the Congregation for Seminaries, if anybody's homosexuality is egocentric, if they've accepted it, are comfortable with it, are out of the closet about it, then they are not even to be accepted into a seminary or accepted for ordination.
The Church's teaching on sexuality has changed, certainly, over the centuries, but we still do not have, in my belief, a viable sexual ethic. And homosexuality is kind of on the cutting edge of the Church's theological tradition on sexuality. And I think the hierarchy, who view themselves as the guardians of the tradition instead of the prophets of the people, are bound, or feel they are bound, to preserve that traditional teaching, and I think erroneously believe the teaching hasn't changed. And if they would, you know, study some theology and of sexuality, they would see that the Church's teaching on sexuality has developed over the centuries. But I think that you know, homosexuality is on that cutting edge. Working in this ministry that I do with the lesbian gay community, I come into contact with many priests and religious, you know, I know for a fact that many priests are gay. And I think there is an unwillingness on the part of the hierarchy to admit that fact publicly. Somehow they are not believing that to be a lesbian or gay person is part of God's plan, that some people are lesbian or gay and some people are heterosexual. And even some members of the hierarchy, you know, happen to be gay. But there is an unwillingness to deal with this issue in a public way and to deal with the issue of homosexuality in the priesthood.
Be it gay or heterosexual, has as much to do with how you relate to a piece of art or music as it does about how you relate to a person of the opposite gender or same gender. And to declare that in someone as disordered is a disordered statement. How can one be disordered in that which God has created them to relate to Him? It's like saying to God, I'm sorry, you know, you'll have to put in another telephone line. We don't accept this one. That to me is blasphemous. And then to say to someone, because they try to live out of that God-given way of relating, that is evil. That's worse than being accused of child molestation. And 10%, at least, of the population, and now I am in joy and gratitude to God, declaring myself as one of those 10%. 10%, or maybe 20%, and some would say more, are called by God, are called by the Creator to bear witness to their faith in saying no. We are not disorder. We're not better. We're not worse. We're different, as you were different, and as God is different. And you know, I believe that it's probably one of the greatest acts of faith in my life.
You can open our eyes.
To say that I am part of the gay image of God. And I could not have done that without having been tested like gold in the fire. In the fire of being so falsely and savagely at a level accused of something that I wouldn't even dream of doing.
He got on top of John Schaefer and reached down onto his clothing. He touched his genitalia. He took John Schaefer's hand while he was on top of him on the floor and placed John Schaefer's hands inside of his pants, which was a sweatsuit that Father Lynch was wearing.
Knowing my own sexual orientation, having made no issue of it publicly, for the reasons that I've already told you, and knowing like that in the eyes and mind of your average Joe, that to be a person who is gay or to be in any way associated with them is to be, you know, dirty old man who hangs around loos and molests little boys. And knowing in my own personal experience that that was as relevant to me as flowers on elephant. I was not that. Never had any interest in little boys. But I hadn't even, quote, come out about myself. And then to be labeled as a child molester. I was the safest person in that school to be near those boys. And all the investigation and inquiry bore that out. Precisely because I'm gay. And precisely because I'm so careful about that. I knew exactly what turned me on and what didn't turn me on. So I knew exactly what to avoid and not what to avoid. And what's more, living and working in the gay community, if I wanted sex, it was there. All of us, black, white, heterosexual, gay, women, lesbian, all of us are co-equally image of God. If the church hasn't got the goodness to accept that, the church has got a problem. The church is not being God to people. The church is not incarnating its own message. It was religious people who got rid of Jesus. Because Jesus was about the freedom of love. You know, what boggles my mind in all of this, I wish there were so much love in the church that the church could afford to get rid of some of it. And instead of gayness being an excuse for the church, to batter people, in God's eyes, it's an opportunity, it's an invitation to the church to love God in all the multiplicity and extravagance and extraordinariness and mystery that God is. And as long as we stay with that, we will not have crusades. We will not have the self-righteous right versus, quote, the non-self-righteous left, or we will not have the discrimination that we so often have as a result of people's religious beliefs.
Bernard's gay. Have you known that for a long time?
I have known that for quite many, many years. It made no difference to me. He was always good and caring son and a good priest.
After all that's been said about Bernard, how do you feel about him?
He's still the same to me. I love Bernard, he loves me. No.
Yeah. And I am able to say to you that it is better for me to be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not. Because the God in my humanity that I have given myself to is in who I am, not in someone's definition of who I am. I would pray that God uses me as his way of saying to all the different out there, no matter what their different is, in your difference, you are closest to me because I, your God, am different. Your ways are not my ways. My kingdom is not of this world. And those of you who are different, rejoice in that, because in that you will most truly meet your God, and you will most empirically experience the freedom of living your life out of God for love.
You've tried that message inside the hierarchical Catholic Church, and you're now saying something that is totally contrary to what the hierarchical Catholic Church says about gay people. What's going to happen to you?
Christmas has happened. It was very important that I did God's will, and it's always important that I do God's will. And it's the only will that I'm interested in doing. Like, it doesn't take a lot of courage for me at this point. You know, I don't want you to overestimate that in saying what I'm saying. I've already lost everything. I mean, where I'm coming from, I've even lost my good name. Where I'm coming from is the abandon of love. That abandon that I always talked about. And you know, one of the funny things about this, especially in relationship to sexual minorities, I was very often able to give them a freedom that I myself didn't know, couldn't have, couldn't enjoy. I was, I suppose, to use an image that I like, I was like the parent that put them on the shoulders to see the parade passing by, even though I myself couldn't watch it. Well, now God has said, you know, climb up on mine, you can watch it too. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, and I don't apologize to anyone. You know, you have more of Bernard Lynch now than you've ever had, and I am very happy to give you that, because that's the best I have to offer. And that's what God wants, my heart. And God has always had my heart. But God has more in my heart today than God has ever had. And I would die happy today, knowing that. I really know that.
There's a free fact sheet about attitudes to homosexuality in the Roman Catholic Church. For a copy of this and a previous publication out on Sunday, please send an envelope with 2 first-class stamps to Roman Catholics and Homosexuality, P.O. Box 4000, London W3 6XJ, or Glasgow G12 9JQ.